Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Out of Spec Podcast, including to me. I haven't been on the podcast in a while, and here I am, your host, Francie, back from a long trip to France, which, who knows, maybe I'll talk about that another time. But today, summer is incoming in the United States, and that means a lot of people are getting ready to go off-roading in their Cybertrucks. And there's some news about more and more controls and basically abilities within the Cybertruck that have just recently been released. So, Kyle, let's get into it. This episode is made possible by the support we get from Fort Collins Kia. If you are in the market for any electric Kia, not only do they never add market adjustments, they will deliver your car to you anywhere in the 48 contiguous states for Out of Spec viewers. More information in the link in the show notes. All right, Kyle. So I know that the Cybertruck was advertised as more truck than a truck, right? And a lot of people take their trucks off-roading. Yeah, it was. That is all more than anything you know, which I don't know if it's really lived up to all that yet. But people are excited to take their truck off-roading, even though there is some things in the warranty that we cleared up on another podcast that you cleared up about actually taking your Cybertruck off-roading and what is allowed and what's covered in your warranty. So I'll link that in the show notes. But today we're talking about this tweet kind of, but also the off-road mode app within the Cybertruck. So Wes Morrill from Tesla, what exactly is his position, Kyle? Remind me.
I forget his exact title, but he's basically responsible lead engineer for Cybertruck.
Awesome. So he tweeted out that the off-road mode got an app, and yes, lockers. So basically, tell me what's going on, Kyle. Why is this significant, and why is it just happening now? Why didn't this come with the trucks originally, do you think?
Yeah, so the Cybertruck launched with seemingly pretty sorted hardware from a physical standpoint. Little things need to be changed. You got to put a rivet in the accelerator pedal, the small stuff. I mean, that could lead to a big problem, but ultimately, it was delivered seemingly from a completed standpoint with hardware. And then the software was just very half-baked. I remember the early trucks we were testing down in Austin, they were glitching out. They had warnings. They had all this bunch of, stuff. They just felt like prototypes that they were delivering. And since then, I think a lot of the focus has been on improving the reliability of Cybertruck, making those warnings go away. And truly, in 10,000 miles now of ownership on my Cybertruck, I haven't had one glitch, one false warning, nothing. It's been rock solid. The problem I've had with my Cybertruck, and actually did a video on Out of Spec Reviews not too long ago, is that they delivered a product that I purchased, of course, to make videos with, but others have purchased based off of perceived function, and it does not still have those. As an example, at the time that we record this podcast, the truck still does not have Autopilot. It still is limited top speed to 114, even though they say it should do 130 in the tri-motor one that we have. And what's funny is the press tri-motor trucks, those do 130, but the consumer ones don't. So it's been interesting following the rollout of the Cybertruck thing. One of my main issues with the truck was that there are physically installed locking differentials, especially in the dual motor, on both axles. In the tri-motor, it's just a front locker with a rear virtual locker. And we'll talk a little bit about that here. And they had not been active. So we've been seeing these videos of Cybertruck getting stuck and in very light terrain. There must have been a software update for it to, at some point over the last few months, start to do some cross-car torque vectoring by brakes. So simulating a limited slip differential by way of brakes, which is kind of how every normal car works. And now, finally, we have locking differentials. But even beyond that, we have a huge update to the off-road app, which was normally just under a custom drive mode tab previously. And now there is more functionality, off-road cruise control, more control over suspension, and just a more holistic off-road package here. So I'm very pleased to see a lot of this. What do you think?
I think, if you're going to have a truck that is more truck than a truck and going off-roading, it only aligns that Tesla will give you all of the software to back it up, no matter when it came. So I think a lot of people are going to be happy about this from what I can tell. So if you're tuning in on YouTube, you can also see this tweet from Wes, which shows what you're going to be able to see within the head unit of your Cybertruck. So on the left side, you get a vitals page, which I'm sure is certainly important when you're off-roading. You want to make sure your tire pressure, what does that say? Battery temp, front motor temperature, rear motor temperature, everything is in order.
And your locking differentials there. I think you can, it will show you when they're locked or unlocked, those little center squares. But one of my problems with this is on the existing Cybertruck off-road mode, when you go into either Overland or Baja, it will give you battery temp and front and rear motor temp, but with actual degrees of average temperature, not just a bar. So they're actually removing some information that I really like to have the individual temperatures, and now give you a slider. And then there's a little yellow tick mark on all of those that indicate when that's the highest nominal operating temperature. And then if it goes above that, it'll probably start derating performance if you get something too hot.
Interesting. Why do you think they would take off the degree marker?
Yeah, I think Tesla is all about reducing the information to the consumer and making it more digestible. I think this is probably the better way of doing it, that people probably don't need to know what the exact motor temperature is, just when it's getting close to a threshold. And I'd say that's probably fine with me. It's just interesting how right now it gives you the degrees in there. But I think overall, what this now gives the Cybertruck is actual off-roading cred. And we just saw, in conjunction with the launch of this app, it was probably under embargo, Top Gear did a comparison review of Cybertruck and Rivian R1T, the first of many videos to come. And they did sort of an off-road, Baja-style sand running, dune running, and jumping the trucks. And even a little bit of a rock crawl, showing how nice those locking differentials are, which is great. So I think, if you don't mind, Francie, I'm just going to run through everything I see on the screen here, perhaps for our podcast listeners.
Definitely.
So Wes is calling this an off-road app, which makes me think that beyond just the custom drive mode settings that used to pop up, there will be a physical app in the applications at the bottom of the screen. And you can even see that on the Cybertruck bottom dock. It actually looks like a wheel going over something. So it is a physical, like you load up Spotify or the Energy app. Now we have an off-road app. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And within there are two main selections when it comes to the type of off-roading that you're doing. There's Overland and Baja. And Overland is very similar to like the Rivian off-road mode. You choose all-purpose, rock, gravel, and deep snow, and then sand. And each one targets a different suspension calibration in terms of adaptive damper and air. Each one targets different slip angles or slip targets for the wheel. For example, sand mode is going to really allow you to slip a ton, and then you'll be good to go. Baja is sort of the track mode for Cybertruck, which will allow a front to rear handling bias or balance. You can have the vehicle full send. This is in the existing trucks today, which is great. You can turn ESP in a wide range of settings all the way to pretty much full off, and lets you have driveline controls and go full send, which is great. And I'm sure it does something with the cooling systems of the truck and maybe even runs those a bit harder. Overland mode, I don't think anyone actually really had an issue with Baja mode that's in the truck today. We've had our truck out in, an off-road playground, sliding it around, running high speed, even getting a little bit of air on it at times, and just really ripping on it in Baja mode. And I think we were all really impressed. The only thing we would have loved to see was allow all of that Baja mode fun spiciness, but in lower suspension. And it still limits you to high suspension in Baja mode. So I think this needs to come where they say at least run standard suspension or low suspension, because in the canyons, on track, in situations where you're not off-road, or if you're just on smooth dirt, I don't want the suspension up all the way, just for stability and how everything feels, and my half shafts as well. The big news comes mostly from the Overland package, which is going to give you a rock mode, a sand mode, a deep gravel, or deep snow and gravel. And what's cool is in each of those, they will target, a little bit more air, less air. For example, rock mode will do something with the suspension to allow for the most amount of articulation, which is interesting that they can control that because they have physically connected metal sway bars front and rear. It's not hydraulic like the Rivian that allows a lot of droop, but it actually looked pretty good watching it in the Top Gear video. There's also now a rear steer off selection, which is something I was hoping to see, and I'm really glad that that is in there. There are very few cases where you probably need to shut off rear steer, but sometimes in tight areas, it's just more predictable to have front steer. You don't want tail swing. I just want the front wheels to turn. And perhaps even maybe drifting around could be one of those where I just want the rear wheels locked. I don't know. Could be interesting to play around with that. That'll require some. And then, of course, the big one. The big one are the locking differentials, which right now we're looking at a screenshot probably of a dual motor Cybertruck. And this one will show locking differentials rear on or all on. So it's interesting that you can't lock the front diff without the rear. So you first start by locking the rear diff, and then you'll lock the front diff. And then through software, the vehicle will control front and rear motor speeds, which will simulate a center differential locker. I did a whole video on this topic, by the way, if people are confused about this. Francie can leave that linked. It's where I walk through every electric vehicle drivetrain type and locking differentials versus software virtual lockers. That's already been explained on the reviews channel, and I think it's worth it for everyone to at least watch that video if you're not familiar. Wade mode is in this menu as well, which does not change the software of Wade mode at all. But not only does this look like a visual change to me, and with lockers enabled, it seems like all the tuning has been completely updated as well. Plus, now this sort of off-road crawl control, low speed situation, which you can set it down to, I'm not sure, maybe even 1 mile an hour to just crawl over obstacles. And what's cool about this, Francie, is it will allow you to hit the accelerator pedal or brake pedal in off-road cruise control without canceling it. So if you're like going 4 miles an hour and you come up to a small obstacle, you can hit the brakes. And then once you lift back up, it'll go back to the speed that you have set. I've driven a lot of vehicles with these off-road cruise control things. I've never liked them, but I'm looking forward to trying it here.
Okay, cool. One thing also that I think is interesting is the cameras as well. So he says that the camera views are going to be persistent or continuous. So the cameras will stay on so you can have the view under your truck. He says the default view is the front camera with both rear-facing side repeaters, which you can see your rear tires, and you can swipe for a near rear view or swipe again for a far rear view. I think that's great. So you can really check it out firsthand what you're approaching if you're off-roading. Okay, so you did kind of mention earlier about the comparison to Rivian. And so as a Cybertruck owner yourself, someone who does like to go off-road, what is your general impression of this? And then how is it kind of stacking up to what exists as the off-road electric options that are out there, like a Rivian R1T?
Well, the Rivian, just in terms of its size, a lot of the off-road videos we've seen and testing is out in these big open deserts. The Top Gear video was done in Johnson Valley, which awesome place to go off-roading. Here in Colorado, a big vehicle is not fun to off-road. The Cybertruck is big. Even the Rivian's pretty large. I mean, a Tacoma's pushing it on a lot of trails. So the size of the Cybertruck for many of our trails is just a non-starter right there. And a lot of our trails are rocky, low speed, really requires good powertrain calibration. And we will be able to take it on a few around here that we'll certainly be testing now that this off-road mode has come. Our truck's currently in California, but once it comes back here, we'll get it up and do some wheel-in with all the competitive set. Maybe we'll get a new Toyota Tacoma in the press fleet versus Rivian versus Cybertruck. That seems like a good competition to me. There's also a GMC Canyon AT4X we're getting at some point soon, so maybe we can do all the off-roady trucks, which will be neat. But this is definitely like, if you start getting into Raptor territory or, Silverado ZR2, these are just too big for trails. So Cybertruck's kind of on that size. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the Rivian uses 4 motors. And they do some software control for logic, and it's gotten better, but I've shown pros and cons to that system. No question, the Rivian air suspension system allows much more articulation, is much better suited probably to something like this. But one thing I will say is watching the Cybertruck and the Rivian at high speed off-road with a lot of room, the Cybertruck actually held its own way better than I was almost expecting. That thing looked great in the Top Gear video. I mean, it definitely looks really rear heavy, where they're like almost the rear's coming up and wants to almost roll forwards when you get it wrong, which it is heavier in the back. So that is partially what's going on there. So I still think Cybertruck suspension could be way better adapted to an off-road situation. But in my mind, you just can't beat physical lockers. So the question for me is, Will this off-road update now target a software virtual locker in the tri-motor? I don't think we've seen confirmation of that yet. Once our truck gets it, then we'll be able to play around with it. Our truck has not asked for the software update yet at the time of this recording. It's also not hooked up to Wi-Fi, but I'm fairly certain after talking to some Tesla folks that we are in wave 1. However, we're a Cyber Beast, and it could just be for dual motor Cybertruck because of the rear motor in our vehicle. It doesn't have a physical locking differential. It has the independent motors, and so it has to do that through software. How it's going to do that through software is going to be really interesting to watch. I've taken my Cybertruck off-road one time, actually twice, but one time, and we've recorded a video. It was in that drivetrain comparison thing, and it did way better than I thought it did in terms of powertrain control. Wasn't perfect. Front locker still wasn't done, but it was using brakes to target wheel speed, and also it felt like it was trying to do some software virtual locking. So I don't think they're far away from getting the Cyber Beast dialed in a situation like this. All I can say is it's like, finally, the vehicle should have launched with all of this, no question. We're approaching 6 months after start of production on a truck that's supposed to be tougher than a truck, just now getting locking differentials. That's crazy, but I'm excited to see it, and I think it's very positive that we're seeing Tesla support the Cybertruck by actually putting in the software that says what it should do. And man, I'm just excited. I'm going to have a physical locking diff in an off-road vehicle, because keep in mind, Rivian dual motor does not have locking differentials. They use the brakes. And the only other electric vehicle with a physical locker that's in the category is an F-150 Lightning, which is not really an off-road vehicle. Right. So I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens and if it is distinct from the dual motor versus the tri-motor Cyber Beast, and what happens when you take it out on the road and finally get this update. So we will keep an eye on that, and I'm sure you'll be back to update us then. Let us know what your questions are about this. If you've gotten the update, if we have some Cybertruck owners in the comments. Yes, Kyle?
I'm sorry, but Wes had a couple more tweets other than this one that are not necessarily in a thread, but definitely worth exploring. So if you just go to his profile, and we can scroll down from the top, because I think he had a bit more info. Yeah, so here's the trail assist explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the off-road cruise control. Basically, it's hill descent control and ascent speed control as one. It's basically just targeting a certain speed. You can set the speed with the scroll wheel and then add brake or accelerator pedal to bypass an obstacle, and you won't get kicked out of the mode, which is what we talked about. Okay, so nothing really new there other than you can exit by holding the brake pedal down or hitting the scroll wheel. Next would be Baja mode, which I'm excited about. So this is like where you can go full send out in the desert. So this is where he says even standard stability assist is dialed down, reduced, and minimum is pretty much off, which is great. Terrain slider. Interesting. Okay. So in terrain slider, you have smooth sets the ride height to medium, and damping set to minimize pitch roll while driving and drifting. So this is stiff on the damper and medium ride height. So they are doing the lower ride height in Baja mode. So this is like what we're, at least at the moment, we're going to have to use on track. So that's cool. So that's almost like a pavement full send setting. I'd still would like to see low ride height, but that's awesome. So now this is a huge unlock. Rugged is kind of targeting a high ride height and high damping so that you can really take the whoops. Again, you want very stiff suspension when you're jumping the truck so that you don't hit the bump stops all the time. And clearance is only meant to be used to go into sort of a very high suspension, not extract mode, but one down from extract just to clear something quickly. So I love the fact that terrain smooth is now not high suspension. It means we could actually maybe even drift it around on pavement, which I don't recommend, but that's what I like to do with my cars. I bought the spicy truck. I want to do spicy things with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is like all-purpose is best all around. That's what most people will probably use on dirt roads and snow and other stuff. Rock defaults the ride height to very high, cranks up the precision on wheel slip control, and cross-links the air suspension for max articulation. That I want to learn more about how they're doing this. So that's interesting. And then the other modes are self-explanatory. There's also a tent mode. Hell yeah. So this will auto level like Rivian does, where you can hit a button. Actually, Range Rovers have it with an aftermarket module too, but you can if you park on an incline. I don't know if it just does fore and aft. So like if it will just compensate, with raising the front and rear axle versus Rivian uses all four to also control the sideways leveling. But it sounds like it's going to level everything. Maybe we'll see. Then a bunch of other controls. Plus, you can do this through the mobile app as well, which is great.
Yeah, cool.
And I think that's kind of everything.
Yep, that's what he said 6 hours ago here is, on April 29th, is installing on Wave 1 vehicles right now.
So which I've been told by people at Tesla that we're in Wave 1.
Fun.
But I have not heard our truck getting it yet.
TBD.
That's right.
Lots of new updates just in time for summer to roll around and people to be able to really use this, I think. So it'll be cool. Be cool to see what videos we make out of it too. So stay tuned, everyone, on the Out of Spec Reviews channel. I'm sure Kyle will be running and rolling and creeping around with his beast once he gets the chance. Anything else, Kyle, you want to talk about in terms of Cybertruck off-roading?
No, I just want Autopilot.
Yeah.
Still no Autopilot.
Still no Autopilot, but now you're going to have an off-road mode app. So
yeah, great. But 99% of my time with the truck is on road, not off road.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, raising that grievance again, and hopefully that will come to be. What's standing in the way of that, do you think?
I think it's the steer-by-wire controls, because they don't even, like, if you hit a line, like if you're about to drive off the road, it won't push you back in, which is weird because the steering system is controlled through software anyway.
Uh-huh.
So maybe they just don't know how to adapt to it. That's just my guess. No one's ever confirmed that. That's just the only thing that makes sense to me.
We'll have to keep an eye on that as well. Let us know what you think. Thanks, Kyle, for hopping onto the podcast as I acclimate back to the life over here in America from my French ways over there. And we will see you soon on another episode. Let us know what you found interesting about this one, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you next time on the next episode of the Out of Spec Podcast. Bye-bye.